let's get to it. So this is my washing machine. It's currently in pieces because I was trying to diagnose what was wrong with it. The main issue that I was dealing with here was that it was running properly, but every time I ran it, after it was run at least one cycle, I would see a stream of water cascading through the garage from somewhere underneath or maybe behind the washing machine. So the culprit, it turned out, was the fill hose. And so it looks fine from this angle. Let me move it out of the light here. But as you can see, if I get close to it, it's hard to do with one hand, it was actually wearing through on the bottom. And so it was, as it was filling every wash and rinse cycle, it was actually just leaking out. I'll pull the cover off here since I have it apart. It was leaking out and it was actually filling up above the washing tub in this little indent here, and eventually as it would start to agitate during the wash cycle, it would just throw water out that would cascade down through the bottom, and it would eventually fill up in the bottom and then leak out underneath. And so I wasn't really sure what the issue was. I did a lot of Googling, and it seemed like it could potentially have been the bearing underneath the washing drum. I guess those can go bad after a while. Backstory is I bought this washer and dryer set a couple months ago off of Craigslist. Guy seemed reputable. I don't fault him at all for this. It's, you know, this is what happens when you buy used appliances. But anyway, the new part cost, I think, $9.50 on Amazon, and I'll link that underneath the video. But I just wanted to do a quick tutorial here on how to fix this if you're kind of having the same problem. It seems like somewhat of a common issue on the GE top-loading washing machines here. But anyway, it's a very simple fix. I was able to do this with 4 tools once I figured out where it was actually coming from. So you'll need a paint scraper. That's to pop that front cover off. There's 2 little clips right here that you have to get underneath. You just wedge this in there, pop those out, and then you can just pull the whole thing forward and pull it off. Very simple. It feels and sounds like you're breaking it, but it's totally fine. After that, there's going to be 2 more little bolts. You'll need a little 1/4-inch driver socket for that. They'll be right in this area. You'll pop those off. There's one plug, as you can see right here, that comes from underneath. Let's see, where is it? There it is. From underneath the main control unit, basically. And so that's so it knows when the lid is closed. You unplug that. This whole thing pops off. It's just seated on these 3 little tabs. Real easy to get to. And then a T20 Torx as well for 4 bolts off the top. And that's just so you can pull this whole thing off of here, move it out of the way, and this is where your water comes through when it runs the fill cycles. And so I pulled that apart, and I was able to determine, I just started one cycle while this was still set up. You'll see it kind of goes underneath here like so, connects there, and then there's 2 screws right here. Those are also 1/4-inch, so you go back to your little driver and pull that out from underneath there or from up top with I use a long pliers just because it's usually easier to get to stuff when it's kind of buried in there like this, but I'm sure you could get to it with a regular needle nose as well. Shouldn't really be an issue. But anyway, so that was the problem. Basically, I would turn it on. It would drip somewhat vigorously out of here as it was filling, and then as time went on and it kept running through rinse and drain cycles, eventually the water would kind of pour out from underneath. But I'll do a quick little time lapse of putting this thing back together. But it's basically a pretty standard part. It was about $9 on Amazon. This is genuine General Electric GE appliances replacement part, and should get me up and running and doing some more laundry again later today. So just for reference, the 2 1/4-inch screws that come in from underneath to hold this little fill nozzle in place are underneath this kind of sheet metal piece under there. They're kind of hard to get to, kind of hard to see, but they're not too bad. But that's just a quick little reference to get an idea of where they are and how to get to them. All right, so now that the main control panel cover's back on, we got those 4 T20 screws back in there. You can kind of see a little bit better where this piece goes. So it's just under there. You know, the two little screws are in there, the connections in the back there, and then we'll go ahead and make sure we've got our plug situated so we can go ahead and put our cover back on. So that's there and ready to get clipped back in place. Then we'll go ahead and slip the cover back on, get that kind of somewhat ready to go, plug it back in, make sure we plug it in correctly. Or does it matter? No, it does. So it's a little D plug, so I'll only plug in one way. Should lock into place. All set. Just push that guy out of the way, and then this will slide up underneath like that. There we go. And then it should just kind of rest down in place. And you can see a little bit better where these last 2 1/4-inch screws are going to go on. They'll go in there. So actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the water back on. Needs to be open that far. That's probably good. So we got the water back on. You should probably unplug this when you do it. I didn't do it. I don't think it's really going to cause any problems. I've got it set to load size large. That's what I'm going to run here in a minute when I actually do laundry. Cold. Doesn't really matter what you set it to. All we're trying to do right now is get it to fill. So I'm gonna set it where I want it preemptively, because as soon as I'm done making this video, I'm actually gonna do some laundry since I'm like 3 days behind. So go ahead and hit that. Hey, look at that, it's filling up. Looks good. So I'm gonna close that. I'm gonna push that button back in, make it stop, because I don't want it to fill with water before I throw my laundry in, and then we'll finish putting it back together and we're all done. All right, so those 2 are back on. We'll go ahead and just set this front panel on those 2 little locator pin dudes down at the bottom. By the way, if you're having issues with your washer not draining, the first thing you should really do is, try and shop vac all the water out that you can. If there's still a bunch of water in the drum, you're not going to get everything because there's still going to be some in the tubing. But unplug the washer, unplug these 2 little guys right down here, and then this is actually your pump that's going to pump all the water out of the drum every time it does like a drain cycle. I made the mistake of throwing a blanket in that had a hole in it, and it wound up sucking a bunch of material out, clogging the pump, and then I couldn't figure out why it wasn't draining. Shop vac'd it out, dumped it into a bucket, and it turns out it was just full of a bunch of fluff from the blanket. So easy fix if it's not draining or anything. It took me about 20 minutes. Be prepared to make a giant mess. I got water everywhere. But yeah, put it back together and it works great. So go ahead and pop this guy back up. There's a couple little plastic locators on either side that you'll see. You just want to make sure those get lined up with these little holes there and there when you pop it back on. And then it should clip into place like that, and you're all done. So there you go, 10 bucks. Took me probably, once I figured out what it was, maybe 10 or 15 minutes to take it apart and another 15 minutes or so to put it back together. So pretty easy. Anyway, hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if there's any other weird home DIY projects you have any questions on, and I'll try and help. Thanks. See ya.